Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel, Create with Kalia. I'm Kalia. Today, I'm going to be scrapbooking these pictures of my oldest kiddo from one of the many 4th of Julys that we spent at my family's cabin. I have four 4x4 photos and one 5x7 photo that I'll be using for my 12x12 two-page layout today. I've decided that I'm going to scrapbook these photos using the Botanical Textures DSP and my soft shimmer specialty paper in Bubble Bath. I've also brought in several ephemera packs and some other embellishments that I'm going to use to create my 3 embellishment cluster areas for this layout. If you're like me, one of the biggest hurdles to completing scrapbooks is time. So my plan for today is to try to create this layout in under 45 minutes. Along the way, I'm going to provide some tips for making your scrapbooking faster. I'm starting my timer and let's get going. I'm going to start off by building on a base of white willow cardstock. For the purposes of this video, I am going to increase the playback speed so that the video does not take the full 45 minutes. I'm making my first cuts into my DSP. The first cut is going to be 3.5 by 12, and the second piece is 2.5 by 12. I often start scrapbook layouts by cutting DSP in these two sizes because it creates a nice balance and starts my scrapbook pages off strong. So my first tip to increase how fast you scrapbook is to have some patterns in your back pocket that you use often and can repeat the measurements without having to look them up. I'm cutting two 1/2 inch by 12 strips of the Bubble Bath soft shimmer paper so that I can start to assemble my pages. I'm going to add my adhesive to the back, and then I'm going to place the 3.5 sized piece of paper on the far left-hand side of my layout. And here's where I start running into trouble with my adhesive. I tend to prefer to use dry adhesive to put down the DSP on my layouts because I like that it gives me a little time to reposition things and also doesn't create any ripples in my layout. However, once in a while I run into this issue where the dry adhesive starts to bind up within the tape runner and starts to create its own issues. So tip number 2 is to make sure that you have a reliable adhesive that won't bind up within the adhesive runner. I'm now going to increase the playback speed slightly as all I'm doing is adhering down my papers. Although I love some of my layouts that take at least 4 hours to complete, it definitely helps to be able to occasionally do a layout in much less time. The next thing I'm going to do is to adhere down the 1/2 inch strip of Bubble Bath. I'm going to lay that right along the edge of the DSP that I cut, as I feel like that helps give the look of a more finished edge. Next, I'm going to add adhesive to the 2.5 inch piece of DSP, and then I'm going to adhere that down to my right-hand page. Part of the reason that I chose the DSP that I did is that it has a lot of interest in the pattern. So I'm allowing the paper to help do some of the heavy lifting of embellishing this layout. That's also why I chose to use a shimmer paper on this layout. It's allowing the papers to do some of the heavy lifting of embellishing the layout without my having to do huge embellishment clusters. Although I love the huge embellishment clusters and do plenty of them myself, there's definitely room in my scrapbook and in my crafting to do some layouts that are a little bit more on the simple side, and therefore I can complete more layouts because they won't take quite as much time. I'm adhering this DSP down, and then I'm going to once again add the soft shimmer paper on top right along the edge of the DSP. As soon as I have the shimmer paper adhered down, I have my base of my layout complete in less than 7 minutes. I think that that is going to save a huge amount of time. Next, I'm going to take my 5x7 photograph and I'm going to start working on what to do about framing that out. Again, I'm bringing in a pattern paper that has a lot going on to allow that to do a lot of the heavy lifting of embellishing this layout for me. I do decide that I'm going to use black mats behind all of my photographs. So I'm going to cut this mat at 7.25 by 5.25 to give myself a 1/8 inch border around the entire photograph. And although I have decided that I want to mat out the 4x4 pictures in black cardstock as well, you will see that I choose one large piece of cardstock to mat behind the photographs rather than matting each photograph individually. This is another huge time saver when I'm putting together my scrapbook layouts. I choose larger mats and add multiple photographs to the one mat so that I'm not doing the work of matting each photograph individually. Next, I'm going to start cutting down this piece of DSP that I'm going to be placing behind my photographs. I start by cutting this down to 8.5 by 6.5. And as I look at that on my layout, I realize that I've cut it a little too big on the ends. So I cut down about a 1/2 inch to see if that will fit better on my page. I realize that still does not give me quite enough room, so I'm going to cut off another 1/2 inch, making the total paper size 8 inches by 6.5 inches. Unfortunately, the Bubble Bath shimmer paper is a discontinued item. However, Stampin' Up! Does still have plenty of other shimmer and specialty papers in other colors that will give you the same effect. This looks like it's perfect for this photograph. As I've mentioned, I want to leave some of the DSP visible above and below the photograph to make sure that I'm taking full advantage of the pattern on the paper. I'm going to adhere my photograph down, and then I'm ready to also adhere the DSP down to my white willow cardstock base. This video is part of a 3-part series that I'm doing called Fast and Fabulous. Make sure that you stay tuned to the end so that you hear all of the details of what that means. As I add my adhesive to the back of the DSP, I make sure to leave a little bit of an edge along the top and bottom border that does not have adhesive on it. I'm planning ahead just to make sure that if I want to tuck any embellishments underneath the DSP, that I have the ability to do that without having to pull the paper up off my base. I'm going to add the photograph right in the middle of the page, so I use my Versamat to eyeball where that is, and I'm happy with this placement. I then cut 2 more 1/2 inch strips of the Bubble Bath shimmer paper and then cut each of those to the 7.5 inch width so that they'll fit exactly behind the DSP. As I mentioned, these pictures are of my oldest kiddo while we were on a trip to my family's cabin in Wisconsin over the 4th of July when she was around 4 years old. I love these pictures because they capture her personality at that age and the many faces that she would make. She also loved hanging out in this inner tube because it had a bottom on it, and that meant that her toes and her legs were not getting nibbled by the sunfish while we were swimming in the lake. These pictures also bring back memories of my own childhood, as the family cabin was where my grandparents retired when they were done working. And so this is the same lake that I learned how to swim in and spent countless hours in the water at the same age as my kiddo. We're now at 16.5 minutes into creating this layout, and with the addition of the glimmer paper underneath this DSP, I feel like the left-hand side of my layout is done other than adding the embellishments that I plan to add. I'm ready to move on to the right-hand page at this point. You may have noticed at the beginning of my video that I store my DSP and my specialty papers in a plastic storage envelope. That's my next tip for increasing your speed when building your scrapbooking layouts. Keeping everything organized. I keep all of my DSP packs together so that I know that I have a series of papers that will coordinate with each other in the same envelope. I also keep all of my cardstock, both the full-size sheets and the scrap pieces, in an envelope. I store my pattern papers on my shelves in specific categories, either by theme, calendar, or rainbow. I store my cardstock in rainbow order. And of course, I label everything so that when I'm trying to find a specific cardstock color or piece of pattern paper, I can easily find the envelope where I know that those things will be stored. Last, I've created a catalog that includes all of my pattern papers, cardstocks, stamps, die cuts, embellishments, and so on. That helps me both find what I'm looking for and helps me stay organized. If I want to search for a specific theme of stamps, such as Christmas or summer, I can go to my catalog and pull up every stamp set or pattern paper that matches my search term. I also love it because I can search for the embellishments that I have in specific colors, such as bubble bath, and that way I can more easily locate embellishments to help me create my embellishment clusters. Yet another benefit of having a catalog is that I don't end up double purchasing items very often because I've cataloged them so I can easily check and see if I have purchased a stamp set I'm interested in, if I think that I may have already done so in the past. Being able to check my catalog has saved me many times from purchasing items that I already own. I prefer an online option, but whatever works best for you and how your brain works is how you should put together your catalog. I'm ready to bring in the same background DSP that I used on the left-hand side of my page to frame out the pictures that will be on the right-hand side of my page. In this case, I feel like I can leave a slightly smaller border because I've already shown what this paper looks like on the left-hand side of my layout. I'm going to cut the DSP at 9 inches by 9 inches, and I have cut the black cardstock at 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. That gives me a 1/4 inch border around my matted photographs where the DSP will be visible. Now that I've used the shimmer paper underneath the left-hand photograph, I'm going to repeat and do the same thing on the right-hand side of my layout. That's another design tip that can help save you time. Repeat elements that you have used on one side of your layout on the other side. It helps create a more cohesive layout and more cohesive embellishment clusters. I've added my adhesive and once again made sure to leave room at the top and bottom of the DSP so that I'll be able to tuck the bubble bath strips underneath. I cut these to 9 inches by 1/2 inch, and I will slide them under the DSP just as I did on the left-hand side of my page. Another tip I have for helping to make your scrapbooking move faster is to reconsider the colors that are in your photographs. What I mean is that you may have noticed that I'm scrapbooking black and white pictures. These pictures were not taken as black and white pictures, but I was having trouble deciding which pictures to use for this particular layout. The solution that I found was to turn the pictures into black and white pictures because I knew that that could coordinate with almost anything that I chose to use for my DSP while attempting to create a layout in less than 45 minutes. Black and white pictures or sepia tone pictures will often coordinate with almost any colors that you will have in your pattern papers. I'm now just under 28 minutes into creating this layout, and all I need to do are to create my embellishment clusters. I bring back in my packs of embellishments, and the first thing I find are the purple adhesive-backed sequins that have bubble bath sequins. They look great with this layout, so I'm going to set those aside for the final touch when I'm embellishing. I also really like these white butterflies. However, they are definitely getting lost on this layout as I move them around the page. So I don't think that those are something that are going to work for me. I try out the tag from the Washes and Florals tags and realize that that also does not work with the bubble bath in a way that I had hoped it would. Next, I find the Spring Celebrations Mix and Match ephemera pack and realize that the bubble bath flowers and butterflies will work perfectly for this layout. I also find the word beautiful in the color bubble bath in the saying something mix and match ephemera pack. I punch that out and I think that it works perfectly at the top of my page as my title for this layout. I start taking some of the butterflies out of the Spring Celebrations pack to see where I can place them on my layout to try to create my 3 embellishment clusters. As I start punching these out and laying them on my layout, I'm really liking the way that this looks. I like that I'm bringing in yet another color with the addition of pumpkin pie, and I think that it works really well combined with the bubble bath. The butterflies in this ephemera pack also come in several different sizes, so that's helping me create additional visual interest within my embellishment clusters because I have 2 different styles of butterfly and then also several different sizes. I'm also going to be grouping things in threes as having odd numbers is also pleasing to the eye. I'm working to create a visual triangle while I'm working on building these embellishment clusters so that I will have an embellishment cluster in the bottom left of my left-hand page, at the top, which will also include my title of my left-hand page, and then at the bottom right of my right-hand page. That will create that triangle that helps bring your eye across the page so that you see all of the pictures. As I'm working to start gluing my embellishments down, I do bring in a scratch piece of paper because now that I have this layout pretty much put together, I definitely don't want to risk getting adhesive places that I don't want it on the layout. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first video of a three-part series I'm doing called Fast and Fabulous. I'm trying to complete this layout in under 45 minutes, making this my fast layout. In the second and third videos, I'll be showing you how to take the same basic pattern for this layout and elevate it. Make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel, and also make sure that you push the notification button so that you know when the next two videos are posted. I plan on posting next week on Tuesday and next week on Friday with the additional two videos in this series. As you can see, I'm continuing to play around with the embellishments, and I'm giving myself the time to create the embellishment clusters. I've ripped some pieces off of the flower embellishments that were part of the same ephemera pack to make the flowers a little bit shorter. And I've also removed some of the leaves on some of the die cuts so that I can better create the cluster in a shape that accents the embellishment cluster that I'm trying to create. I finally get this situated in a way that I like, and I work on getting it glued down. One of the tips that I mentioned earlier was to have some standard layouts in your back pocket where you know the measurements and don't have to think about them or look them up in order to recreate the layout. Keep in mind that even though you're using the same measurements, you'll be using different pattern papers and different embellishment clusters, and so your scrapbook will never get boring even if you're using a similar design repeatedly. However, another tip that I have is to use sketches to help you increase how quickly you can get your scrapbook layouts done. The layout has already been pre-designed for you, and in a lot of times we'll have the measurements available to you. So all that you need to do is to cut your pattern paper, add your photos, and then create your embellishment clusters that will work for your layout. There are tons of free sketches available online, shared by some amazing artists, and there are also groups that sell their patterns for nominal costs. Any of these resources can help you increase the speed at which you're able to complete your layouts. I also recommend building up your stash of embellishments. Make sure that you are purchasing embellishments that are a style that you know that you'll use often, such as sequins or dots, and that you also invest in colors that you use a lot of or that coordinate with multiple types of your papers. Some of these items are low cost but add so much to your layouts, and many embellishment packs include enough pieces that you'll be able to use them for multiple projects and layouts. I've now glued down all of the butterflies and other embellishments that I had previously taken out and was planning on adding to my layout on the left-hand page. I've also printed off my journaling on Avery sticker paper. I will have a link below for that particular product. I use a clear label paper to print my journaling so that I can adhere it directly to my scrapbook layout. I'm now using the sequins I set aside earlier to complete the embellishment clusters on the left-hand page. I'm adding 3 of each of the sequins to the 2 embellishment clusters to help them feel more complete. You may have noticed that I also added some brushed brass butterflies from my stash. I feel like those have helped me complete my page. I now move over to the right-hand page to complete the last of the 3 embellishment clusters. I'm again using some of the same dies out of the ephemera pack, some more of the brass butterflies to surround the die cuts, and then again adding 3 sequins to complete the embellishment cluster. My embellishment clusters are small, but as I spoke about earlier in this video, the paper is bringing a lot of interest into the layout, and therefore I feel like I can use smaller embellishment clusters to complete the page. I will have the full list of the products I use to create this layout in the description box below, so please make sure to check that out. And with that, my layout is complete. I was able to finish this layout in 44 minutes and 30 seconds by using paper that did a lot of the visual work for me and then adding basic embellishments. I was even able to add my journaling to this layout. My last tip is to get outside of your own comfort zone and try a similar challenge. See if you can create a scrapbook layout in less than 45 minutes or less than an hour and see what you come up with. You may be amazed by your results. One last reminder to come back next week to see the additional 2 layouts I designed based on the same sketch. If you liked this video, here's another you might enjoy. Thanks for watching, everyone, and craft on.